Smart. Oh yeah, you got your little screen thingy, so it works.
Yeah.
I'll post if you want me.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Hey,
Hey,
Champa.
ooh. Yo, what's up?
First things first, we're gonna review your
Oh.
I felt that coming.
F in chat.
Okay, fuck. Getting this bad boy set up is gonna be the most annoying part. It
Yo,
works.
yo.
All right.
What is up?
Welcome everyone. Oh, okay, 7 people poured in. All right.
That's not bad.
No, not bad at all.
That's not bad. We are live on
Instagram.
YouTube.
And
Is working.
Okay, let's pop
Dope.
those links.
I did post.
Oh, did you?
But you can post. Yo, what's good, everyone? How y'all doing?
Ready for a wild time?
It's gonna be a wild time.
Okay.
Perfect. You could post that if you want. Do you want me to delete that and send you the link?
I'll just also toss it in. Oh, forgot how to
copy and paste. That looks good.
Forgot how to right click.
We're also live on YouTube too. I doubt you would want to tune if you're already tuned in on Instagram, but
it does look a little fancier.
It does. You can your comments pop up, and we have a green screen with the everything is cool background video playing. So, oh boy.
How to grab an Instagram link? Not certain.
You
can't
just copy and paste your Instagram link. You can't. No, that's because that's the whole point. Like
I feel
trying to get the live stream.
100%. Yeah.
The boy. Yo. Heart gang. They're just throwing hearts at you.
Okay. Let's
When's the last time you were live?
I think I haven't been live in like 2 years yet.
You were like chilling in the hotel.
I literally I was in Paris.
You were in Paris, right?
And I was just so bored. There's like nothing to do. Like I don't know how. Only me. I can find literally nothing to do when I'm in Paris. Just smoking cigarettes out my fucking window.
Make link shareable. Is it not shareable? It should be live.
I was able to find it when I went on.
Donovan. Yo, Corey. Corey's watching on the YouTube.
I wanted to be able to conference him in, but I'm so bad at
I don't know how to shit. Corey, if you're still watching, if you go on Instagram, you can request to be in the video.
Okay.
Whichever. I think you're watching on YouTube.
Fucking hell yeah.
Yeah. 21 people? Hey, that's not bad.
So yeah, this is going to be a bit of a test run. Going to be working out the kinks, so bear with us. But we're going to be reviewing submissions for the Everything is Cool remix contest. And if you guys want to drop any other tunes you're working on or whatever, be happy to critique them because I'm already fucking here.
Yeah, might as well. If you have anything to drop in, we'll peep it.
More content, the better.
Yeah, you can share it. How do you want them to share it? How do you want them to send it to you?
So what I have here in my Facebook group, Walter's Wild Ones, we have just kind of a thread. So far, there's only 4 links posted, so we'll definitely be able to get through them and get through yours. So drop it in there, and I'll definitely be able to see it. Yeah. Should we
We can wait for a few
I was
more
gonna
people.
say wait for like a few more people to come in, and then we'll get this rolling.
Yeah. I'm drinking a raspberry White Claw. Says Donovan.
So what's the like? This is gonna sound stupid. What the fuck is the deal with White Claws?
I don't know. Have you tried?
No, like I've had many of like vodka.
Stay tuned for part 2 of Walter Wilde's Wednesdays, where we drink White Claws and review White Claws.
When we run out of music, just start reviewing food and drinks and maybe some meme reviews.
Classic Arizona.
That's a 10.
That is a 10. Although I still haven't gotten my fucking shoes, so that's goddamn Adidas.
What is it, like a limited?
Yeah, it was limited, and then they like basically only gave it to people in New York because like their pop-up shop got closed, like shut down by the police before it even opened because like there was a crowd, like thousands of people waiting in.
I'm sorry, your business is doing too good. We can't have that
It's
lineup.
so stupid, yeah. So they're like, we're sorry, like, please like enter your address, and then if you live in New York, we'll send you. It's hyped for absolutely no reason. It's honestly not even good. No laws when you're on claws. Clip that snare at 34 dB.
How do I make my snare hit hard in the mix? You just keep pushing it up.
You just drink a White Claw and just slam it in the mix. It's easy.
After about 3 G clips.
After about 3 G clips. Definitely. Fuck you, Donovan. Although I do miss you and your Rhino bus.
Rhino bus?
But I've still never seen the Rhino bus.
I'm
Rhino
sorry.
bus. I've told you.
I'm blanking. My brain is not. Oh,
He has the bus and it's like.
It looks like a
It looks like a Rhino.
I can
That's the
totally
Rhino
understand
bus.
what you're saying. Just didn't know that was
Yes, there's an art installation, and my guy has like a bus. It was like a school bus, and he made it like he decked it out with these like reflective panels on the outside, and then like a rhino head basically on the front. There's a full stage like on the top that you set up. So like at EDC, they had like Algo and Neonix and Ominous and FISO like DJing on it. Inside of it, you've got like every single gaming system in there.
Holy shit.
And then screens are inside and outside. Like it's insane the work that he's put into it.
That is so fucking sick. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Alright. Before we, I think we just lost like 2 people, so I'm gonna just fucking
talking about White Claws.
I'm gonna just let this thing roll. I'm going in absolutely fresh with these. For the people that have linked stuff, what do you call it? I have not listened to them because I wanted kind of more of a genuine first reaction here.
All right.
I have
Who's this?
I get to set up my audio.
Oh yeah.
MIDI.
Yeah.
It's playing
So
out the
if you
speaker.
want to submit some requests to be in Walter's Wild Ones on Facebook, I'm over my laptop, so I'll accept you like right away. And then there's a post in there. Drop all your links in there, and we'll listen to them and review them. If you don't want it to be posted in there, like just direct message or like any
100%.
like yeah, Facebook direct message Walter Wilde or myself Rattrix, and then we can play it
100%.
from there. Because I know people get iffy about posting private links.
Yeah,
Which is
I
fair.
mean it's totally fair. I think if anyone tries to like rip your work in progress private link from SoundCloud,
Yeah.
they're fucking dumb. They're dumb. Even if it sounds amazing, they're dumb.
And if they still submit it and expect us not to tell the difference between that and the other person's.
So
Alright.
this first person looks like it's
Smile.
Smile.
Oh,
Oh.
Smile. Smile is a Vancouver homie.
okay.
He's fucking tight, Jason. He makes some good shit. We have like a collab in the works, but I haven't really gotten to it.
So yeah, just let her rip, I suppose.
You know what? It is mind-boggling and astonishing and very smart.
out.
So wobbly.
Everything.
Wow, that was actually really fucking clean.
That was super clean.
I was like unsure of the level we were going to get in terms of quality, but so far this is starting
Well,
out
yeah.
nice.
And one thing with this is it's whips, right? So
No, 100%. Yeah. I really like this like first bit. This first bit's fucking really sick.
it's like kind of vowel-y.
Yeah, yeah. Trying to think of like little critiques I can give. Over that, I can hear like, I mean, this is such a taste thing. Just like a little, kind of like harmonics, just some harmonics I kind of have in the background.
Yeah.
Other than that,
I feel like maybe a little more percussion. Like, in the
yeah,
sense of like
yeah,
just a little bit of like a hi-hat or some sort of like foley.
just to kind of get you like moving through,
Yeah.
keep the song driving.
I like the difference in dynamics in terms of like you kind of get this like heavy kind of like noise sounds for a sec over like this more like deep kind of sounds.
100%.
I think he's off to like a really good start.
Hell yeah, and that's really fucking sick. You said he's from Vancouver?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Shout out Vancouver gang.
Next little one we got is bongs and blankets.
Bongs and blankets. I fucking dig this.
That's a really good Wook name. Gonna be real. Okay, so this is actually kind of a long one. We got
Good.
this one's 4 minutes. So it says no mixing, so I won't get too fucking critical.
Yeah, bro,
about
the
mix
kick's
here.
too loud.
I'm so happy with my decision to give all of the stems. I feel like at first people weren't super happy about that, but just to hear like the little layers from the original.
Yeah.
Because so far this guy's done like a good job of like really kind of making it his own.
Everything is cool.
Okay.
All right.
You know what? And you can hear it. You can hear it with your ears.
Why does my brain want to? The smallest critique I have so far is the you know what, and like the order of the vocal samples confused my brain, but I think that's just my brain being like, that's not what comes next.
I feel high listening to this song. This song made me high.
Everything is cool.
Like,
I'm
that
having
was
an
so
acid
chill.
flashback now.
Yeah, that was so chill.
Music was invented. And you can hear it. You can hear it with your ears. Your ears hear sounds. Sounds. Your ears can hear sounds. Your ears can hear music. Think about it. It's something you can
Pronounced.
It's something you can enjoy.
That didn't actually
Music
help.
is something that is simplistic.
Faster?
But if you think about it, it takes long hours to make music.
It's just chill. I like it. So deep.
I'm fucking with actually how long the intro is.
Yeah. Ooh, I like that percussion. I really like the ideas that are in this one.
Yeah, the ideas are really unique. The only thing it's making me want is just like more activity in the drop, I guess, would be kind of the
Yeah.
best way to put it. If there could be like just more basses filling up some of the space going with the percussion. Other than that, like the atmosphere that you've created is like really, really sick, and the percussion's really sick. Just a little in some of the gaps, literally just drop, you know, little quarter note basses. or
Something,
whatever,
yeah. And like,
just to kind of fill up the space. And although I get the sense that this isn't really made as like dance music.
it's really chill, like really kind of like more head nodding. Like,
Exactly.
just almost like that reggae dub in that sense,
Yeah.
which I really like. I think if you're gonna go for that like kind of hype of a build initially, like I get the switch with like the drop, but have a little more oomph with it. Like you got the sub, but like have some sort of other like layer that's just a little more weight to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then of course no mixing, so like I'm not gonna say anything about mixing, but overall it wasn't too bad.
100%. 100%. No, I really enjoyed that. Super unique.
I almost like the second drop better in the sense that it was really that kind of like more reggae, but it
Let me
had a
go
little
back.
more.
Let me go back
here.
for a second. Do you mean here? Kind of thing?
Yeah.
Bum, bum, bum. I literally
Yeah.
just think on the offbeat it needs something. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think just put the little like offbeat guitar,
Yeah, just a skank would work.
the skank, the offbeat skank. You gotta put your head back to get into the YouTube stream. It's just your hat. There we go. That's better. There we go. And then like I'm not in the Instagram, so it's.
Do we have like comments going on here? Because
Oh my God.
Yo.
Oh wow, wow,
Yo,
wow, wow, wow.
okay,
wow.
our thing wasn't updating. We just thought no one was talking in here. Yo, Zuba, what's up? Yo, we missed out on so many comments.
Okay, let's
Okay, that's
get to
good.
these comments here. Holy shit,
All right,
sorry
all
guys.
right. Sorry, that was not updating. Dude, real quick, congrats to Rattrix. Yo, thank you. Allie, Drippy's in here. Yeah, okay. Did Drippy request? Yeah. Okay, let's see if we can add Drippy. See if he picks up. Oh shit. Yo, gang. Wow, so many. Yo! Yo!
Just watching this.
Yo!
Definitely on the YouTube tips.
What's up, Corey?
Is it echoing?
No, it's good.
No, we're good.
Okay, I was gonna say I can get my AirPods, but I should do that anyways. I'm gonna do that.
Yeah, dude, do it up.
Get your AirPods. We want to see your AirPods.
Sponsored by Apple.
Yo. What's up?
Alright, these are the new AirPod 3s.
Screw the reviewer reviewing AirPods now.
Buy them now. Use the discount code. Everything is cool. You can get one AirPod and you'll get the other one for free.
Is that the deal?
I wonder if this just worked. Or if I just put on AirPods that don't work.
I mean, I hope they work.
I'm just not gonna use AirPods. But we can get back to these remixes. How many we got?
So, not a lot. I was hoping there would be more work in progresses. Let me do a little refresh here, because might not.
There's 4 so far.
4 so far?
Yes, but then like we're hoping there might be a few more in.
Yeah, 4 so far. We've gone through 2.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
I think it's still kind of early in that sense, you know, like as most of us
Yeah.
know that we don't do shit until the last minute.
Artists are procrastinators.
Artists are procrastinators.
How many dabs did Trippy take before hopping on? No, man, that's just him. That's just Corey.
That's just Corey. I think someone asked, by the way, YouTube, if you're not in on the Instagram, we got Drippy on the Instagram here, so
Yes.
that's why we're yelling at Drippy.
Yes.
Yeah, it's working now. Someone asked any upcoming artists.
Any
I want to
upcoming
shout out.
Off the top of my head, fucking, just because I got reminded was in the chat. Champa is really good. Thinking of other people. I mean, I'm sure you don't need me to tell you Baldy's great.
Baldy is fucking great.
Wait, he's doing a remix for the.
No, someone just asked like good upcoming artists, and I'm just like listing. My boy Drippy here.
On Casey Dubs, Jub Dubs,
yeah.
Yari, Akios, Neonix.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Most people in Sinister Six, I think it's called.
Sinister Six, yeah, Sinister Six, yeah. That whole game.
Pretty good.
And then me and Neonix and Akios are all on the same management now. And
Yes.
That's fucking
Yeah, I saw
tight.
that.
Got the boy
And
Subantics.
Yeah, the Bobantics, the legend. Yeah. So we're all in there. Why is your live not popping up?
My live's not popping up.
It might once I refresh. There we go.
Sick.
Sick. I can jump on there. Yeah. It's fucking sick. Do you want to hear the next remix?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's go.
It's just his fucking mouth.
This is by Devo. Oh, my boy, Brendan. This is his friend from Michigan, I believe.
Oh. Send a request to be in the Snizwald. Send a remix. Sick.
I'm hoping everybody can hear your sound.
So that lead is like nice, but needs to be brought down. Oh shit!
I can't hear you.
You can't? We're not talking.
No, I can't hear the song.
Oh.
Okay.
I think it's not like the
Pardon? Let me
I don't
pause
know
it.
if the rest of the people on. Yeah, so people can't hear me, or people can't hear the song because I'm in this video. So
Oh.
I will be listening and typing in the comments.
Okay.
Okay.
Got you,
Sounds
buddy.
good.
Alright.
Peace.
Peace. I think like kind of his audio takes over ours.
Okay. Yeah, there we go. All right, he left.
All right.
Can't hear. Song
Can't
good.
hear song very well. Can't hear well.
Oh.
Did I fuck this up or something?
Let me bring
All
this back. Let me bring this back.
All right.
Let's
Tell
just do
us if you can hear this one.
fucking take two.
It's mind-boggling and astonishing and very smart that everything is cool. Everything is cool because it was invented. You can hear it. You can hear it with your ears.
Good troubleshooting.
Your sounds. Sounds. Your sounds. Think about it. It's something you can hear. It's something you can enjoy. Music is something that is simplistic. But if you think about it, it takes long hours to make music. That's cool.
That's heavy as fuck.
Everything is cool. Bring it up. Cool. Dubstep is cool. It is mind-boggling and astonishing and very smart that everything is cool. Everything is cool because it was invented. You can hear it with your ears, your sounds, your sounds. Think about it. It's something you can hear. It's something you can enjoy. Music is something that is simplistic. You're right. Think about it. It takes long hours to make music. That's cool.
Okay.
Everything is cool.
It's like clipping on Insta and fine on YouTube. All right.
Yeah, it would be fine on YouTube probably.
Yeah, so we're doing this stream not only here, but also on YouTube. So check the Facebook group if you want better quality.
Cool. It is mind-boggling and astonishing and very smart that everything is cool. Everything is cool because it was invented.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. As far as like songwriting goes, like that's actually really good. The only thing I was gonna critique was the mix.
Yeah, I would say the mix is it's very muddy in places and a bit. I think more for me the layout, like the flow is just there's too much going on.
Yeah.
It's a little bit overpowering and nothing's like popping out.
Yeah. Just some more like.
I'm just here to admire Curtis's shirt.
What's your name on YouTube? So we're actually streaming on Rattrix's YouTube account.
So
The link should be in my Facebook group, Walter's Wild Ones, or just head over to, what's your channel called?
I think it's just Rattrix. If you search Rattrix, it should pop up. But yeah.
Champa Dub sent a request to be in your video. You want to toss Champa?
Sure.
For a minute?
Let's talk Champa. Yeah, if you search Rattrix, it works. Like, yep. Yo.
Hey,
Yo, what's good?
everything is good. Everything is cool.
Everything's cool.
Yeah, I had to use the opportunity.
How's it going, man?
Good. How are you guys? I
Good.
just popped in. I was working on it too.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. You're working on a tune yourself. Okay. The
What's up?
the remix you sent in, like I fucking love so much.
It's so good.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Really stoked on it.
Yeah, no.
Everything.
Yeah, I'm really stoked to get that out. Do you have any idea when they're coming out?
I know I don't have like a direct release date right now, but I do know in the fall it's gonna be good. Just going back and forth with Ganja, kind of one.
Yeah. Word.
But
Dope.
deadline for the contest will be September 1st, so
Okay.
I don't imagine like much later than October, November.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, that would be perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. We still have to finish our shit as well, so.
Yeah. We started. We're actually some of the late fucks.
We're so far behind. So probably after the stream we're gonna work on it some more.
Hell yeah.
But
Yeah, no, that remix was really cool. Like Curtis said, there might just be like a little more going on. I would stick to like.
yeah, I think he was watching on YouTube because he commented on YouTube. So yeah, man, like I think it's just a little bit overpowering, and like the arrangement could use some work. Try chopping some stuff up to give each other more space. And I think what Cam said initially too about that like the lead in the intro, it's definitely need to be brought down in volume because it kind of overpowers everything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I first heard it, I literally was a little like almost. It was overpowering shit to the point where I was kind of confused.
Yeah, and I think just like play more with chopping up like the intro and trying to make it a little different and stuff.
Yeah, but other than like I do like there's a lot of good ideas in there. I think it's just gonna be about like stripping out the ideas that you don't think are kind of the better of the bunch.
Yeah, I think that would ultimately be what I would say. Were you listening in on that too?
I was about to ask you. Were you able to hear
What's
that?
up?
Were you able to hear DVO's remix that we just played there? Or no.
Oh no, I literally just got in here. Like,
Okay, no
Okay.
worries. No worries.
All Gucci.
Yeah. We got like.
There was one, and then I think someone said they
Sent
messaged
one?
you
Okay.
on your.
Would that be on my Walter Wilde page?
Yeah. So they messaged you on there,
Okay.
and someone just requested to jump in. Yeah, man.
Let me open up this and then.
You want to show us your whip, Mr. Champa?
Yeah.
wait, what?
You want to show us what you're working on?
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't know how good the sound quality is gonna be because I don't have monitors in
Okay.
New York for the summer. But
Okay.
yeah, I think maybe if I flip the camera, it might be a little better.
Okay.
It's a flip for Babatunde, the Peekaboo and G-Rex track.
Oh, fuck. Nice.
Oh my god. Ooh. Oh my
I dig that.
That is so fucking sick.
What's up?
I said that is so fucking sick.
Thanks, dude. Appreciate it.
Oh, your flow and sound design are just top notch, dude.
Really appreciate that.
Yeah,
man.
that's
Thank you.
fucking tight.
Oh my goodness.
Shout out Madison for her and her, I think it's her cousin or whoever the little baby is for tuning in and listening to us.
Doing some nannying, maybe.
Doing some babysitting. Fuck yeah.
You guys still reviewing remixes?
Yeah, we got I think 2 more
Two more.
remixes to review.
That's a brand new one, and then did you find the one on your? Was it
No, I haven't.
Snizzwald?
Snizzwald.
Did you send that in, or? Yeah. Anyone else who has whips or anything?
Yeah, just throw it over. I got.
Throw it on his Facebook group or his Facebook Messenger. Just shoot him a message.
I have some shit I could send you. I don't know if you've heard everything, all of my unreleased stuff.
Yeah, send us some shit.
Please send. Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay.
I've got a nice fat playlist.
We did get. Okay. We're.
You can just pick and choose.
All right. Why don't we do the last one first?
Wrong.
100%.
I'm just gonna send it on Facebook.
Okay.
Sick.
We're gonna probably do the last. We'll probably do the last couple, but like.
We have to drop out.
Yeah.
We can have you back, but like it fucks with the audio, and we have someone else in here for when we're actually listening to the tune. If that makes any
Oh yeah,
sense.
no worries.
But yeah.
No, I'll totally get off.
Hell yeah.
Get out of here. But send us your music.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. All right.
Okay.
It's fucking good talking. I wanna.
Yeah. Peace out, guys.
Peace out. All right. So we got one more. YouTube, how you doing? You guys doing good?
What do we
all
got?
6 of you.
There's 6 on there. Okay.
That's not bad actually.
It's not terrible.
I know we're kind of like taking priority for Instagram, but it's just like because of people are being added to the call and stuff. But yeah. All right. So this last one
Is by, and he told me how to pronounce it.
I think it's Haster.
Haster.
Jeremy, are you in here? You were making sure we pronounce it right. Get the fuck off, Chompy. Fucking drippy. You should see if them muting their mic helps. I don't know if you can mute your mic when you're in the live request, Madison, when you're talking in there. All right.
Yeah,
So let's do.
that would be a nice option. Oh, I'm gonna just click it.
Is this Haster?
Mm-hmm.
Everything is cool because it was invented.
Okay.
It's something you can enjoy. Music is something that is simplistic. If you think about it, it takes long hours to use.
Jeremy knows how like triplet drums. This is what he's.
Sound.
Woo!
Oh yeah.
I like
Just
really
hear the
like
kick in the
this one.
snare.
This is like really fucking good.
Damn. Hi-hats in the D&B section are just filler at the moment. Wanted to add more variation.
No, that was
Okay.
like a really, really, really cool.
Okay, yeah. So Jordan, that's Haster. He's watching on YouTube. Jeremy is his manager.
Okay.
That's what it
Okay.
is. Yeah. What'd you think?
I thought that was like out of the four, probably my favorite so far.
I really liked it. I really liked like what I noticed right away is how he cut up the melody and like stretched it and shit to make like a new melody.
Yeah,
Because it was the same synth, right?
Yeah.
That was really sick.
Yeah, and just the overall flow was super, super nice.
Yeah. I think.
Let me listen to the mix.
Yeah.
Could use maybe like more like saturation.
Yeah. I think like definitely more saturation. Your sub is too loud, I think, in comparison to everything else. But of course, these are all still whips, so
100%.
I would definitely say turn your sub down, and then just really like put that shit through a fat rack and really like pull out all those wet sounds and the little bits and pieces of them. Because once you start putting it through like distortion and stuff, you really pull out those undertones that you don't really hear normally.
Cut the mids, saturate the highs, and that's
just cleaning up the mix, and like I really like the flow of it though.
100%.
And the incorporation of everything else into it.
Yeah.
He said he's gonna fix the D&B part. I thought that was a nice touch, but
Yeah, the drum and bass part sounded really good to me. I can hear what you mean by like placeholder hats, but quite honestly, they didn't sound bad. Like it was still flowing nicely. Didn't distract me too much.
yeah, no, I think you're on a really good track with that.
Oh yeah.
Just keep working on it, and that's sick. That's fucking sick.
That's sick and cool.
Sick and cool.
Let's see. My buddy John sent in Daku. And
The one comment, what the fuck? That just seeing the comments, you can usually tell you're like, oh shit, this is gonna be some good stuff.
So fucking yes. That OTT.
OTT gang. Instagram, can you hear okay? Somewhat, yes, no?
Yeet. Okay.
Okay.
Fucking hell, John.
Wow.
That's that is really sick. That's Daku from Minneapolis. Really sick producer actually.
That's fucking tight. That's gnarly.
I don't have like a lot to say, John. Like maybe like I can hear that it's like a work in progress. There's only so much to it. Like it kind of ends abruptly there, but what you have there is really fucking solid. Kind of gives me those like Black Label vibes.
Yeah, really like rough and just like
Testosterone music.
fucking want rhythm dubstep.
No, it's really sick. I don't have a lot to critique.
Daku.
Yeah, dude, that's keep showing me that. Keep updating me with that.
I like that one. Hana. That's solid.
Fucking really, really sick. Yeah, there's some good competition in this. I'm actually really, really pleased. Thank you guys for fucking killing the remixes so far.
Hey.
We have.
Sup, Aaron? I can see you're watching the stream, but it won't let you comment for some reason. That's really weird.
That is.
Mr.
Are you
Aaron.
on YouTube or?
I think it's on
Instagram?
YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah. Shout out, Aaron. Like the heavy mastodon type stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, dude, it's just fucking distortion.
Just a lot of. Just clip it.
Yeah, just clipping and really just like finding a way to get that crunch, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
No, I mean I shouldn't really. I've never been one to make like heavy ass sounds.
No, I'd say that was more my end.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like, you're capable.
Yeah.
It's just like it's hard to put in like.
I'm capable.
Do you imagine it as like wonky song and then it's just Mastodon?
That was like the Recoil remix.
That was though. That's why I love that one.
I love just like looking at the crowd. They're expecting the wonky song, and it's just like, no, you fucks.
Recoil remix, just a long note.
Okay, so someone sent in a Wookworm work in progress. I'm assuming this is a remix for Wookworm. Snizwald.
I think you were on the Instagram if you are still here, my guy. I can't tell if you are. But
I'm gonna give her a click. This song, like I'm sure everyone knows. It just
turn
goes
it back up.
the fuck off. Anytime I've ever played out Wookworm, everyone's just like, ah!
Oh yeah, this is the one you showed me. Is it in here? Yo, what's up, Justin?
It's a bookworm.
Okay. Oh, he's in there. Yo, dude, this is tight.
This is really tight. I feel like I'm gonna give the same critique on some of these songs. Okay, I really like that. Got some like old school Excision Datsiki vibes.
Yes. Just that whole.
Right? That's John.
Yo, John.
Hi! Made me
Fuck
drop
it.
my water. This is so good.
Damn. Thank God you don't have tissues. That shit's good.
That's okay. I was literally about to say, put some harmonics on it and maybe a skank. I feel like that I've given that as a critique for one of the last songs, but literally just try and fill up the mix with as much as you can without making it just too random, which it's not. I'm not saying it's random, but just put stuff in there to kind of assist what you have going on.
The flow is really nice.
Mm.
Like, you just like, When you see me start to do this little move, then you know it's like that. You got that flow.
Oh yeah.
I think that was really well done. I can't quite remember the original, but like that was fucking solid, and definitely just more harmonics on that, like just bringing it out a little more. Ooh, just do that. Just record him right now.
Yeah, if you could just sample me oohing. Oohing and goohing.
Yeah, that's fucking sick. That's tight.
Okay.
What else we got?
So I got. Champa sent me
Some Champa.
something to
Y'all want
listen
to hear some unreleased Champa?
This is gonna be
Yeah, good job as well. That was tight.
really tight, dude.
Yo, that mustache though. And Justin hasn't seen you in a while.
Yeah, I've been getting more and more woke.
Yeah. That's the goal.
Out in September on M&G. Very sick, dude.
Oh, nice.
The M&G dudes are, I don't know, they're based out here. Really good guys.
I think, yeah, M&G is. Fuck yeah. Yeah,
I'm
no.
actually going to be working on a mix for M&G pretty damn soon here.
Nice. Yeah, Vince and the guys are good shit.
That's really fucking sick, dude. I got no critiques to give. Just let me download it. Is it okay? This.
Do I have anything?
Do you have any? Let her rip, dude.
I don't know if I do. Fuck yeah, dude, that's tight.
Most are download enabled. Okay, there's a whole set here. I missed that. Oh dang. Here, let's give you guys like a little preview at Champa's remix of Sugar because it's fucking.
It's
really
so good.
It's really sick.
It's so good.
It's 4:30 in the morning, man. You're not okay. But at least you're working.
Fucking hell. This is so good. Let them be surprised with the second drop. Don't give them the second drop.
Oh,
don't give them the second drop.
All right. Yeah, the second drop actually is really.
It's fucking so
It's fucking
good.
mint.
It is mint. What's up, everyone?
Hey, gang.
Gang. What's
Yeah, no, that right. It's a fucking huge one.
Yeah.
Champa's ridiculously
Yo.
talented.
Yeah, that is a fucking vibe, my dude. I don't have much to send right now. They're all like whips and shit. I sent you the Warlords bootleg, which is gonna be an original, but for now it's Warlords bootleg.
Let me open it.
Shoutouts.
Oh, yeah, like just fencing around me on.
Yeah. All right. This is some
This is
shit.
now me reviewing the boy here.
No pressure. Yeah, that's good.
Why does this make me want to do like cocaine in Miami?
Yes.
Oh God, not another Skrillex bootleg.
You got it in the bag. It's good. You wanna know the weird thing? I still haven't heard the original. I've seen so many remixes. Holy fuckers. Keep this up and you'll be on Netflix.
Soon. Yeah. I'm probably gonna rework that first drop, make it like more diverse and shit. I had a few ideas, but you'll fuck me up. Shut
Right?
up, Madison.
Nas is so fucking sick.
Yeah.
Do you want me to play the second drop?
Yeah, we can play the second drop.
Let it roll on through.
Get a little break in there. Literally breaks.
That used to just be an old strategy of mine, just like, let's throw an amen break in there for the build up. Just drop it.
Just fucking drop it. Nope.
Bacon. Jesus.
Oh, what? It ended. Oh, let's go live again. Yeah, we're back. We're back.
funny as fucking. We're listening to hardcore.
Yeah, sorry about that. The video just cut the fuck out.
Same drop.
Yeah, sick as fuck, dude.
Thank you. It's getting there. Yo, everyone's back again. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, Hasta, good job. Keep up the good work.
Should I show what me and Izzy are working on?
Yes. If you would like.
Oh, I mean, I'm just like, do you think the people... You guys want to see what me and Izzy Vadim are working on from, like, the start?
Fuck, it's so good.
Mr. Big.
Mr. Big.
Also, gonna be doing the contest for Dance Festopia. Gonna be choosing some random numbers here in a bit. Forgot about that, but I'm gonna get on that. And if you're not here, I'll just post that later.
Okay.
So yeah, this is me and Izzy Vadim.
We're just gonna be barely visible.
I fuck with it.
I fuck with it. There we go. We're just existing in this stream. Oh, it's so good. There we go. Some tricky shit. Fucking see me. Oh, it's so good. Thank you. Fuck, dude. My favorite.
This comes out. I don't know. I don't have plans for anything that I'm doing. I just do it.
Fuck on me. Piss on me.
Just beat me, dude. Just beat the life out of me.
Beat me. Oh my god.
Okay, you know what? I'm also gonna take over and show you the...
Show us your penis.
Yeah, totally. Next thing... Next thing is
Walter
just
Wilde cancelled.
me getting banned from Instagram. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
This is me and Subdoctor Raw.
Yo. 15.
15 peeps.
15 peeps and
on YouTube, what we got?
2.
2 on YouTube.
Shout out 2.
Shout out to the 2
But we
people
got a
on our
healthy
YouTube.
stream.
You like that one.
have like. Dude, fucking so good.
Thank you.
So good. What's the track name? Raw.
Raw, but it's unreleased. I got some things I need to finish. I got. Should I show the jub, or do you think that's like?
It's been minutes since I've heard it.
You know what? You guys can hear my jub collab as well. It's certainly not done. This is like a work in progress thing. I have not done the giveaway yet. I will be doing that pretty much after I check out these tracks, or show you guys these tracks.
Yeah, and again, too, if you guys have any other whips that you want us to hear,
Drop them.
drop them in the Walter Wilde Ones group, or just DM Walter Wilde on Facebook.
I will be peeping.
Yeah.
Oops.
Oh,
Just went right in the middle.
Just a little trigger happy. Nice. Nice. Sued by Little Nas. Hey, Tyro, you fucking... Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna do this all the time now.
Hey,
We're fighting in Denver. These hands. Talk about. Peace out, Justin.
need to fill this in.
That shit's nasty. It's nasty. I would double that.
You would.
I would double that.
Would double. Thanks,
Yes.
guys. I'm glad the people approve.
The people.
Glad you approve.
Yeah, fuck it, dude.
I've been listening to that and just working on it like, fuck me. But it's the fun of music. It's just like a little puzzle that eventually you figure out.
Yeah. Pastor, send that other shit. You said you had another thing. Drop that somewhere.
Drop it. And probably need to check my Walter Wilde messages. Holy shit.
Wow. All right. You're not in charge of the phone anymore.
I'm putting this boy here. Just put it there.
There. Yes, only on me.
Is that alright?
Is that better? Would
Would
you like the cord moved?
I like the cord moved? If it would help us,
There we go.
we're gonna break.
Send to the Walter Wilde page. Dope. Come do Chico or Chicago. Chico. Thank you. Chico. California?
Ayer, dude. So someone just sent me something to listen to called Voyager.
Voyager.
This is by Versible. It's Versible. Take a little spin.
I don't know. Let us know if you can hear this properly too, because it's kind of close to the speaker. So.
You sent it to the Walter Wilde page. Okay, I'll check that next. was just checking like the inbox. Once again, this is by Versible. If you want your track listened to and reviewed, send it in either as a message or to the group Walter's Wild Ones. Oh, okay. I actually really like this.
This is really nice.
Yeah, maybe turn down this a little. Oh my fucking god, dude.
Oh!
So I'm downloading this. This is actually really sick.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Is that like meme?
Oh my god. Damn.
That's really fucking sick, dude.
That is good shit. Yeah, that is 127 followers. 127 followers on SoundCloud. I
There
mean,
be
like,
some gems out there.
as following. Ooh, that little.
Yeah, for sure. Send in whatever the fuck you want. We hear listening. Any drink? Yeah, that's gonna be a no for me.
Yeah. Are you stoked for High Caliber?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm playing on a battleship. I have a hard time even envisioning, like, what that really entails.
That's gonna be so sick.
But,
I just seen a few people comment.
that's gonna be really fucking sick.
Air Bear, I got you. I'm sending it to him right now. That is so tight, dude. Good work. Good fucking work.
I gotta take, like, 1 minute break here. I gotta piss real bad.
You piss. I will entertain them with my arm and potions.
Please do.
Yo.
Oh.
What's up, gang? No, sorry, I meant any Drake. You want us to play Drake? You built the High Caliber website? Nice. Yeah, send in originals, send in everything. We're down. Kick it. I just heard Cam fall on the stairs. Yeah, what's up? You guys are the best. We try. We try. Oh. Where do we send them? You can send them to, if you go to Facebook and go to Walter's Wild Ones, the Facebook group, request to get in. We'll accept you like right away. I'm on my computer. And yeah, and then just there's like a post there. You can submit your shit or just send it to Walter Wild's Facebook. And we're checking it and linking it and everything. Let's see, do I have anything else from me to show you? By the way, if you don't know who I am, my name's Rattrix. Collab with Cam on Everything is Cool. chilling. We're both from Vancouver, like 20 minutes away, so stopped by. Wanted to hop in on this stream for a bit, hear how these remixes are going and stuff. I'm stoked. Look at that, you guys are already requesting to be in there. I gotcha. Yo, G-Jobs. What's up, Gary? Another local boy killing it. That's that Wakan shit right there. Yeah, shout out G-Jobs. Don't listen to him. You need to. Ratatouille. That is me. I am literally Ratatouille. What are you talking about, Ratatouille? He walks in. I am literally Ratatouille. What date is the contest end?
September 1st.
September 1st is the deadline.
Get your shit in by September 1st. And we'll be Gucci. Definitely, it'll be, the winner is going on the EP on Subcarbon, so it's a pretty tight reward, honestly. Subcarbon has been nothing but wonderful.
They have been nothing but wonderful. My ass is fucking moist.
I opened the window a little bit. I could probably use more.
We can probably get rid of the.
Yeah.
So when we first started,
I feel like Joel's
when we first started the green screen behind us, like on our YouTube, we have like a video playing, and the green screen, there was too much light coming in, so we covered it with like a jacket and like, I think you can probably even see. Oh, he took it down.
Well, it's up but down.
So that was covered with the jacket,
And then they hit a
this
fucking
beautiful
yoga
yoga
ball.
ball to block out the rest of it.
It's,
So that was our solution to trying to get the green screen to work. But now it's kind of like fading because it's darker in here. So, all right, now we have to deal with setting this. Oh, first time's a charm.
I need to have like a little rubber thing down here.
I forgot to bring my little phone clip stand thingy that I had.
Oh,
yeah, I know. Okay, I forgot.
I forgot that you had that.
You didn't know I had it.
Or maybe, yeah, that's probably.
I use it
what
for my
is.
stream stuff.
I think I've like. I thought I'd seen you. Maybe I just saw someone else.
Wom. Yo, ass is moist. Yes, you heard that correctly. Unfortunately,
It's a wet booty. Yeah.
It is. Do you play drums? I don't play drums.
Do I play drums? No, I mean, like I could play the worst drum beat, like or just like really simple stuff, but I'm not a drummer. My dad's a drummer, and he studied a little bit of audio engineering, and that's probably why I have a small knack for this. So yeah, those are my dad's drums.
Yeah. Okay, so I think a few people sent you some shit. I sent you Aaron's tune. Oh, now I'm just completely out of the shot again. I just can't win in here.
We trying. Okay,
yeah.
sorry. You sent one?
Yes.
Like that's what I should be checking.
Oh, brother. Wait, what do we? Okay.
Get up on your feet.
Hang on here while we figure this out.
Bye.
Get up on
Air
your
Bear.
feet by Air Bear.
Alright.
Okay, we're gonna hope that works.
If you want your music listened to, drop a link in my Facebook group, Walter's Wild Ones.
You can't even say
It's a bit of a tongue twister. And if you're not in there and don't feel like showing everyone else your link, just send it to either Curtis or I over Messenger, and we'll try and get to it quickly.
Yeah, either Rattrix or Walter Wilde on Facebook.
You want more Wally? very exclusive. A sick dude.
Sick. What are you thinking?
Maybe just like a mild amount more movement in the synths.
Yeah.
If I was to give it a critique of any sort. But that's like my ears probably wanting a very specific thing.
Yeah.
So take that with a grain of salt.
I would say like what Daku just said, the drums are too loud in the intro, and like I wouldn't leave them in the intro but make it quieter because they stand out a lot. Like the drums overall are just generally louder than anything else, and it's good to have punchy drums, but like they're kind of taking away from everything else.
I would almost suggest in the intro. Let me go back. Was it the same? Doesn't need to be a snare there. Just use a clap, dude. If you use a clap in the intro, the snare is gonna have that much more punch when you hit the drop.
Yeah, you could just use like a clap or something, and then like just if you're gonna have those heavy of drums, then like make sure the drop kind of fits with it. You know, I feel like the drop itself is not bad, like it's good, but it doesn't go with how heavy your drums are.
Mm-hmm. And let me listen to it. Like a transient shaper, just like bringing down the decay, so it's like a really tight drum, will probably do more because it's not like a super heavy intro.
Yeah.
You want to always match the energy of what you're working with. So if you're working with something that's kind of on the chill side, little vibey, having this croosh is gonna just be like way too much. It's like aesthetically, it just doesn't belong together. How do you put it? Yeah. I think just like a clicky little snare there would be
Keep
tight.
the second drop too, because he said it's different. Also, shout out Adventure Day. He said, I heard good things about me. I hope there's good things about me. Fuck yeah, dude. I appreciate that.
Shout out, homie.
Hella good vibes about me.
Love you, Brendan. I actually really like the flow of the second one. One more suggestion I would give would be to like mix up the tonality a little bit more. So if you have like a bunch of sounds that are kind of going like wow, 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 you're gonna want some like that's the best way to describe it. I hate that that's all I know how to do. But you're gonna want some like variants. Maybe use some like saw synths or
Yeah, just a little more variety in there.
But other than that, like honestly, pretty damn well done. I'm being kind of an asshole here.
Yeah. I like what Daku's saying, all his feedback. Pattern Screamer remix. No. Well, yes. So I've decided if y'all can get me to 5K followers on SoundCloud, I'll put out an edit pack, and that will be on there. So I'm around getting close to 4K, so another 1,000 or so. I've gotten a gazillion messages, people wanting to download it, wanting to buy it, wanting to suck my dick for it. There's been a few weird ones, but yeah, I'm not giving it out right now. I'm just keeping it close in the close circle. But get me to 5K, and I'll drop that shit along with probably Death Pit Edit, maybe the Simon Shake, Sharnigan's Waltz in there. You know, all the ones that you guys keep asking me for. So yeah,
That's pretty exciting, actually.
That is exciting. Accents.
This is next one we got up to listen to is another one by my dude Daku, with
Either
his
Hug
friend.
Zero or Hugo.
I'm thinking Hugo.
Hug Zero sounds
funny. Hug Zero, like Sub-Zero.
Yeah, Sub-Zero, but it's Hug Zero.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
That actually
I'll
makes
get you
sense.
200. I swear to God, though, if you buy me bots, I will cut you. I'll cut your dick off.
Not just out of my life. Your dick is off.
I'll cut you out of my life.
All your dudes are so loud, John. I love
They're
it.
so dumb.
Oh, it is Hugo? Okay,
Hugo.
okay.
Hug Zero. No, I'm calling him that. Yo, YouTube, how are we doing? We still in here? How many people we got? 2? Still got the 2? Nice.
Jesus.
Fuck yes. Oh.
This is gonna be a fucking big one, dude. Oh my goodness.
Damn.
So I'm thinking like,
Dude, you're sleeping on some shit right here. Zero public tracks, my guy. Like,
yeah, no, he stays real.
Dude.
I got to hang with him when I was in Minneapolis. That's how I know him. But he does not
Alright.
post enough.
dude, there's some good stuff. You're hiding some shit. I'm telling you right now.
He used to work with Subject 31 and shit, like back in the day. He has a creation collab.
Okay.
He
Fuck
like
yeah.
he just doesn't release anything.
Hit me up. Yes.
That's really fucking sick, John. The only critique I would have.
What?
Why? I have so many picky opinions always. Might just be like a tad too compressed, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think it's a little too like scrunched to the point where it's just like it gets that clipping kind of distortion, which like can be intentional, sure. But I feel like if it was really clean, like I'd be like, fuck.
Yeah, exactly. But that's like such an easy fix. I really don't think that's like a problem.
Maybe a little bit cutting the low mids a little bit. I don't know if this is a done tune or not, but like
just a little bit. But your sound design is always fucking crazy.
I really like your sound design, and it's really similar to some of the shit that I've been making lately. So
you boys should work.
We should do the work.
We should do the thing. Haster sent that other one. Do we have that somewhere around? I think we're losing track of where everything is.
100%.
Haster, did you send? I think you sent that to his page.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
second
And
one I sent you.
my adventure
My
day.
phone is dying, so I'm gonna get my.
You go get your charger. I'll entertain. No. I think my adventure day was asking if we played the DVO one. We did, and we thought it was pretty dope. But there is some work to be done on it. It was heavy as fuck though. Let's see. Do I have like one more thing? Maybe I can show you guys. I'll show you the Sketty collab. That hasn't been shown. Actually, I don't know if I have the Sketty collab on me. I think so. Yeah. Hold up a minute. Yeah, dude, Daku, hit me up like on Rattrix or Facebook, wherever. Let's do some shit. All right, this is a collab with a local guy named Sketty. I'm gonna play the Sketty collab.
Oh, you got one with Jim? Jim going?
This is a work in progress, but it's almost there. Now you have to have the fun time of figuring out how to balance your phone while it's charging.
Half of me is considering we take a commercial break or just like a 10-minute break while I charge it.
Well, you charge it.
Not certain.
Well, good job that you're driving a drunk friend home and he's not driving himself. That's responsible.
That is good shit, my dude. Fully supported. Don't drink and drive. Don't be a fucking idiot. Oh, I've heard this.
Oh, yeah.
You guys got any release plans for this, or is this going to be in the negative pack?
No. I don't know what we're doing.
It goes.
Hello! Oh, yucked up fake.
Yo. Yeah. That was my collab with Sketty, the boy.
Jim is
Hello, Yuck.
Jim is great.
Sub my you. Take Rattrix to Michigan too. Bro, I fucking wish. Just hit up your local promoters.
This is the I want to take this man everywhere. One day that's the fucking dream.
Bro, yeah, definitely.
Let's see. I gotta figure out how to charge this bad boy.
Hey, if you are doing the everything is Canada. All right.
We'll talk more about that literally.
Yeah. That's the idea.
Okay. Let's see if this.
So we're gonna have to figure. We might have to go sideways here. Oh, did you beat the system? I'm promoting Cam. Fuck yeah, dude. I got you guys. Electricity. Okay, yeah. I've heard that name before.
Yes, out in Detroit. That's who I got to. That's how I met the boy. But
I have an idea. We can find something that works. Intuitive phone balancing. Like, oh, this is like
terrifying me.
Let's see. Hang on. I think we got it.
Oh wow.
Oh wow. Wow.
Did you
realize? Did I? I think I just. We got it.
I wish you guys could see what we just did.
There's two candles between his phone case balancing it.
It should be in your Walter Wilde DMs from Jordan C. Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Walter Wilde, the hidden gem.
Yeah, I love when events just come
Peace
up
out,
forever.
dude. Have a good night. Why is your voice a lot different than what I pictured? Who? Him?
Yeah, I don't know. Couldn't. Maybe I have a Canadian accent.
Oh, fuck, bud. He's got a fucking Canadian accent in it. Oh, fucking hexed. Hexed by Haster.
Was that?
Holy shit, eh?
Yeah,
Let's fucking give that a rip and see how it sounds.
yeah. What kind of Canadian is that? Because I know that, like,
Oh fuck,
like
I don't know.
Nova Scotia.
It's like fucking Nova Scotia, eh? Fucking in the boonies. A stupid skater dude type. Yeah, he looks like the skater dude.
Nah, dude, I'm just a fucking nerd. I don't even know how, man. Never been out that way. For sure. Yeah, hit it. My Facebook group or message either of our pages. This is really dope.
This is really good. Damn.
Right? No, this is really fucking sick. I just tossed you a follow, dude. This has been consistently good music.
The second drop is gonna fuck with us.
Oh, I feel like I can see the phone like sleeping. Just watching the speaker like vibrating a little. This is raspy. But the third is the real slap.
Shout out Psytrance.
Is that the genre?
I don't know. I don't.
No, literally, I couldn't like define psytrance for you, so that's
Neither could I.
where I am.
It's just like really minimal.
I feel.
Yeah. Here we go. Bro. Woo. Damn. Woo. God damn, this is clean.
That is really fucking sick.
That is really good.
Tossed her in my likes.
Yeah, I just reposted. That is fucking sick, man.
Okay.
Good
So we
work.
got one from Rex.
Rextrite?
Rextrite here.
I'm
Am
bleeding
I
and-
pronouncing that right? Rextrite.
It looks like a remix of "I'm Bleeding and Looking at Immortal Stars" by Pifsta.
A lot of hard things to pronounce here. But
Pifsta.
I'm feeling hopeful. I'm sure it's gonna be sick. Of course, man.
Real death step hours. Who the fuck up?
The snare might be a little too much. But maybe not. It's like too much high end for me.
Oh,
I do like that transition.
I do
It's
like
just kind of a fake out. I like it. Ooh, that was really.
Bro.
I'll be real. I don't really listen to like heavy dubstep that much, but it's really fucking sick actually.
That was pretty solid. Like for death step, like that's like,
Exactly. Like I don't have a good ear for death step. Like anything.
if we're gonna call it that.
Anything crow's nesty, I just don't have. I respect the fuck out of everything they do, but anything in that vibe of like death steppy stuff, I just
I think try and get your kick to punch through a little more because there's so much going on in this kind of genre. Like try to get your kick to punch through a little more. The snare punches through fine. I think mixdown wise it wasn't bad either. I do like the little switches like right at the drop, that little fake out, and then like after the first 16 bars or 8 bars, whatever it is, the little like the snare doesn't come in. I think that's sick. I think just more transitional elements would help. Maybe just watch your high end as well.
Yeah, that was the only thing I thought about, like just for the snare kind of thing. In the drop, it didn't bother me whatsoever. In the intro, I just thought it was maybe a little too much high end.
Yeah, I'll try to get him to remember to save the live stream. I had this same problem when I like sent some stuff to, I think it was Subtronics or something at the time. Like he gave me good feedback, and then I went to go find it again, and it was gone. I was like, oh shit, I forgot what he said. Fuck. So try and save it. Did anyone send
Good
anything
note.
else?
Good note.
Message request.
Let's see. Appreciate all the love.
Yeah, man.
I'm gonna check my right now. I'm gonna look through my Walter Wilde messages one more time.
Where is everyone from? Like, where are you guys listening from?
Good question.
Have you seen Cam and you seen this man somewhere before?
Oh, of course, dude.
Just curious to see where our viewers are from.
I think I checked this one out. Did I check out Voyager?
You did check out Wilde. Yes. I think that's it.
I think as far as critiquing stuff, that's what we got.
Yes, we're still live. Scranton. Some I'm a wish.
Atlanta,
Some damage. Watch
Minnesota.
and Minnesota gang. Gang. Denver. Look at all these base
Whoa,
cities.
what is your computer's?
Oh, I have the red light filter on aggressively.
I
You're like,
literally was like, is something wrong?
yeah.
Okay, Dunder Mifflin, I see you.
Oh fuck. You have anything else you want to show them? Are you doing the announcement on here, or are you?
Yeah, so we're gonna choose a random number, I guess. I could show like one more thing, but it's like not fucking ready in my head to show. So I don't know. Probably not.
Show it, show it, show it.
Do you guys want to hear what it sounds like when I make just a skeleton of a track? Because it always starts out borderline nonsense and eventually I work it into a thing. I like kind of work backwards sometimes. So this is like kind of sorted.
Damn. Just a whip, just a skeleton of a track.
It is just a
Oh
skeleton.
my god, dude. Dude, yeah, I know.
I think it sucks.
It's so wet. That intro, that little like Cody talk boxy intro is so fucking nice.
Thank you, dude. Thank you.
I think this one's really good too because you really like have this crunch for your basses.
Yeah, that's just FabFilter Saturn for those curious. That and G Clip, download them.
Yeah, look at these guys. They love it.
It reminds me of
duck
dubstep.
quacking.
I have got that my entire career making dubstep. If I, it's all just duck basses.
Yeah, no, that one's a really sick one.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would say like try to get this like maybe add another layer of snare or something because like I know you're kind of going for that Jack U kind of more like less snare, but just
Little more punch.
hit the
Play a
transient.
clap. Even
Maybe not even clap, but just like if it is a clap, just a really tight clap. Just get that transient
I hear
thing,
you.
but it doesn't have to be a big noise.
I might just slap it harder through the transient.
Just slap it harder through the transient sleeper. The transient paper. Because then you got like the offbeat snares. That's like a heavy one. Like
Yeah. I like the
which I really like. Yeah.
I don't know what.
I just like it.
Love it.
Just when your bases were so wet they washed away Code Van Dorm's career. Man, that's completely two different sides of this.
That's what I was like. We're just so different. That's what I was even trying to say about like
Code
Crow's
Evil
Nest is
for
just
Wild
like.
collab.
Could you imagine?
I don't even know.
It would
Wonky
have to
intro,
be. I was
and
about
then
to say it'd have to
yeah.
be me doing an intro and then him just like slamming a really heavy drop with
Yeah.
like maybe some of my screeches.
Yeah.
But don't really imagine that coming about anytime soon. Yeah, I think that's all about I have to do. I'm gonna choose. I'm gonna find like a number randomizer here, and we're gonna choose a winner for Dance Festopia. If you haven't, I'm gonna give you like 2 minutes here to drop a comment in that contest on my Instagram. There, yeah.
What is it again?
There's a chance to win a free ticket to a cool music festival called Dance Festopia out in Kansas.
Kansas. You're like rapidly Google the lineup. Who's on there? It's a good lineup though.
Rusco's on there. I think Uber's on there.
Uber.
There's a lot of good people on there, but those were the people I was really excited about.
Hang on, I got it here. There's a lot of good people. Oh boy, I just can't find it now. Why don't they just have a little lineup link? See if I can read this small thing. Yeah, some of the headliners like Arlo Graham, Zomboy, Space Laces, Allison One.
How do you do that? So on my Instagram, there is a photo in which people are just posting numbers between 1 and 300. If you get the number between 1 and 300, you win a free ticket to Dance Festopia. So.
And if you like the Subcarbon gang, We got him, obviously, Subcarbon, the Boys, Ganja, White Knight.
Is Preston on there?
Yeah, Subdoctor.
Subdoctor's
Yeah,
on there.
I feel like Dirt Monkey's on here too, but maybe I'm wrong. I just can't see him on the lineup. Yeah, and if you like the heavy dubstep, lots of good shit. Hesh, Uber, Minesweeper, all the heavier guys are on there. And then yeah, there's a whole bunch of other just good acts, solid diversity. So worth.
Yeah, I'll give this like 2 more minutes because I feel like I literally just saw like 3 people leave to
Yeah,
go.
yeah. You're like,
Drop a
fuck
comment.
it. That's the thing that's it. But we'll post 2 wins and stuff in the group. So
Minesweeper is so fucking dope.
he's been on like that weird trap shit lately, and it's been really good. He's on right after you too.
Oh, is that kind of the lineup of it?
Yeah,
The timing.
yeah. You're 4:55 to 5:55, and he's 5:55 to 6:55, and then an hour after that is Uber.
That's gonna be a fun little bit. Actually.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fun.
I'm
little
super
stage.
happy that I can play my set and then get like a little tipsy, a little wonky,
A
for
little,
Minesweeper,
a
a little
wacky.
cuckoo,
A
a little.
He's gonna get some sugar in him.
Yeah, I'm definitely.
Yeah, Madison, you just saw Minesweeper for the Crank Dad show. He was just here.
Oh shit! Was he the one that opened? Yeah.
Yeah, he was support for that show, for the Crank Dad show at Celebs.
Darby's crazy. I got to see him like years back when he was playing a show with Twine, and like even that set like way long ago, he was
So-
still playing out some fucking good shit.
Funny story, I was at that show and I had to leave right before Minesweeper back-to-back Twine.
Oh shit! Why'd you have to?
It was just like it was really late or some
I
shit.
feel, and you were a younger.
I was
boy
a
then.
young boy. I was actually 18, so I technically like couldn't go to the club, but like I snuck in before like it even started with everyone else. And that was like my first real like show experience. It was really
Right, you tried to do that with Midnight Tyrannosaurus too. I'm like, Curtis,
No.
run to the washroom. Run to the washroom. The security are coming. You give me this like deer in the headlights look real quick, and I knew you were a goner from
Oh
then
my
because the
God.
security was just like, all right, I want to see all your IDs.
that was the fuck show. They held like the show at this venue that they'd never held like a show at before, and like the security literally didn't believe that Midnight Tea was over the age of 19.
Did they not? I
They
fucking
because
forgot
he had
that.
a Florida license, and they were like, "Yeah, dude, this is fake. You're not over the age of 19." He's like, "I have a fucking beard, and I'm fat, and I'm over 21. Like, what are you talking about?"
They thought he was just McLovin.
Well, they were, yeah, dude. There was a big thing. He was pissed. As would I be.
Oh, I would be too. Trying to think of like my worst show experience. In Seattle, I got kicked out of my own green room
Oh no.
because I wasn't of age yet in the States. I was only like I think 20. And they're like, "Yeah, there's alcohol in this green room, so you gotta go.
And you're like,
This is where I sit. Take the alcohol out. This is my fucking thing."
remove the alcohol. Don't remove me.
But yeah, then they just sent me to like a room by myself with like a broken couch. I just kind of went back to the hotel pretty much then. I was like, fuck that, dude. Fuck that show.
Oh my God. Florida. See ya in KC.
See you in KC. Kansas City.
Still can't believe this dude just said it's a skeleton track, but ruined my whole career with a kick and snare. No man, this dude's thinks he's got a skeleton track, and it's a whole bag thing.
I don't know, I get a little too... Okay, so I have the random number generated. I just hit like the little thing. So, let's see if I got
But then,
any
like-
new... It's gonna have to be the closest number, because I doubt someone's gonna get it like right.
You're gonna have to go through all the numbers too. You gotta go from the first one too.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't think this through.
I did not. So I'm gonna use like little. Do we have the numbers? Did anyone actually click it?
All right.
No.
I think I have a funny
Oh,
feeling
shit.
that he got it.
My God, my dude.
Dude.
Rattrix. You got a free fucking spot
You
at
got
you got a free pass to fucking Kansas City, dude.
So
Or well, the ticket. You got to get yourself there.
yeah, so the number that was generated was what, 158?
158.
And
Yeah, I
you
got
got
one.
154.
You were the closest, yeah, out of the whole dang thing.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding you.
I just watched it.
Just for proof, just for evidence, in case someone ever like tries to be like, no.
That's actually hilarious. 158. That was totally like.
Oh, now we gotta get this fucker back.
Dude, that's hilarious. I hope you can go. Like,
really hope you can go. Yeah.
yeah, like the odds of that is hilarious.
1 in 300. Those are literally the odds.
1 in 300. That is so funny.
Congratulations, man. Yeah.
That's great that you're live and to see the reaction.
Right.
We should have done like
so
a
fucking
drum
happy.
roll or some shit.
Fuck. When is it? All right. Yeah, we. The production value on this will get better.
Yeah, this is. He's gonna have fun when I'm not here.
Let's see.
I was just on it. It's
September 5th to 8th. I think. Look at it.
yeah, September 5th to 8th.
Oh, I actually did. Cool. Cool. Yeah, September 5th to 8th. You got free in Kansas. Yeah, that's exciting, man. I'm gonna toss your account a follow here so I can like follow up with you here.
Dude, that's hilarious.
Instead of a free ticket, can you let me just pick someone in their comments? Is what he said. I don't think he can go. I think I'll just do another random number. As much as I would like to say yes to that. So here's okay.
All good, dude. Like
I actually really respect that you said that because it's gonna give someone else a nice little opportunity. So if you can make it to Kansas, let's see, what do you call it? Okay,
what do you use? A drum roll. All right. And the number is what?
Okay, this is a really long drum roll.
This is a really long drum roll.
See, you said you could pause it to it. Oh, I thought there maybe be like a little. There is not. Random number. I wish it worked like that.
Show them the random number.
So what we got up. We got 96.
96 is the new winner.
Now for me to check who the fuck that'll be.
So if you
I have a feeling it's gonna be.
If you put a reverse of 69. Oh, there's
someone that hit 99.
There's a 95.
Oh, 95, 99. Okay, and I get this number 96. Okay.
It's 95.
Sub-octopus.
Sub-octopus music.
Sub-octopus music, you win. Oh my god, this video is about to end in 24 seconds.
But congrats.
But congratulations, man. I am gonna follow you so I can follow up with that.
All right. I guess we're out of here. You can't get out. Shit. What a
In
mess.
total, though, 80 people.
Hey, so that's a high five.
And
we're still on YouTube, but no one's on here except for I think either Tally or me.
Okay.
If you're the one person watching on YouTube, dope. All right, so
should we take 5 minutes and then?
Yeah, let's chill.
I was about to say.
All right, we're gonna pause.
Do you want to go side for a second? I can use this.